Today, I'm over in Newport Beach, California, and I'm actually in a neighborhood of one of my subscribers, Willie. He invited me to come check out this area, so I'm going to walk around his neighborhood and talk to you guys about why the economy feels so bad right now, even though all the experts are saying that everything is great and it's all going to turn around. And this is pretty much the narrative we've been hearing over the past few months, especially as the inflation reports come in consistently lower, the jobs numbers continue to come in above expectations. All these things keep happening, but yet people are still feeling the pinch. So what's the disconnect here? Why is this happening? Why is the government, why are all the economists saying that everything is turning around, but in reality, when you look at your bank account, you're feeling poorer. You have less money than you did a year ago, and things still cost more than ever. So what is going on? In fact, check this out, guys. CBS recently did a poll, and they found that 61% of the people who answered believe that the economy is struggling right now, and 65% describe the economy as bad, okay? So what's happening is all the numbers and all the data, all the reports that we've been getting is not really lining up with people's real lives and what people are feeling when in terms of how much their monthly budget is and how much things have gone up over the past few years. And the reality is, even though inflation is supposedly slowing down, it's not reversing. It's not like inflation is going down and the cost of everything is getting cheaper. In fact, it's still the opposite. Inflation is continuing to go up, albeit at a slower rate than it has previously. But it's still on the rise. I think the last number was what? 3% or 3.4%. It's still going up by 3.4% year over year. And here's the other problem, guys. This could be one of the main reasons why people are feeling this pinch right now is wages are rising. That is true, okay? But the problem is the real wages have barely risen at all when you compare it to pre-pandemic levels because of inflation. So even though people are getting pay raises, it simply just hasn't been enough for most people to feel that increase that they're getting in pay to be able to keep up with the increase in cost of living, because the cost of living costs are rising faster than people's wages are. And without getting too sidetracked, just one quick point of why I keep telling people this is one of the main reasons why the housing market will correct itself is because of affordability, all right? Unless wages continue to go up, and up to the point where people can afford today's prices at these interest rates, it has no choice but to go down unless there's some massive government intervention. And then, of course, we all have to eat, right? Well, groceries went up 11% from 2021 to 2022, and the typical yearly inflation rate for groceries is only 2%, guys. So we literally got 5.5 years worth of inflation on groceries in just 1 year. And they don't even have the figures here of how much it went up from 2022 to 2023, but I can personally tell you from being somebody that eats that it has gone up even further than that. So really, we could have been seeing at least a decade's worth of inflation on food prices in the span of just a couple years. And what's the other big one? Oh, no surprise here, housing costs, right? All these houses cost a fortune, guys. To buy one of these houses right here, you're still looking at like $2.5 million, all right? Who has that kind of cash right now? That's the crazy thing. And people look at this, they're like, my grocery bill's higher than ever, my rent is higher than ever, my utility bills are higher than ever. How are they saying that the economy is getting better? How are they saying that all of this is reversing? And the other problem is this is disproportionately affecting younger people just getting started in the real world with their first jobs and trying to make it on their own. And it's also disproportionately affecting, people, low income folks that don't make a lot of money. Because when you have a higher income, you're able to absorb these higher costs of living increases better than someone who doesn't. You might have more disposable income available to make up for all this extra money that's being spent, but somebody that's already living paycheck to paycheck and can't even afford to go out to dinner, when they get an increase in cost of living and their electric bill goes up or their rent goes up, it can be catastrophic to the point where it might put someone on the street. And here's the other thing, right? I've always told people, watch what they do, not what they say, right? You have all these experts, all these economists, all these government officials saying how everything is so great, yet the Fed is continuing to raise interest rates. So if everything was so great, why would they be continuing to raise interest rates? They wouldn't need to, right? They would already be cutting interest rates if it actually was going so well, right? Because when the Fed starts cutting interest rates, that means one of two things. It means one, the economy is not doing good at all, and they have no choice but to cut them. Or it means, number two, they finally cured inflation and everything's going to be perfect and they're going to have that soft landing that they've been wanting to have. The personal savings rate right now is continuing to drop. It's estimated that by the time this fall rolls around, all the pandemic savings that people had saved up will be pretty much exhausted by then. And it's not like it's just affecting people that, are on the low income side of things, or younger people that are just getting started in their financial life. Like, realistically, even six-figure earners right now are having trouble making it. At least the ones that are living paycheck to paycheck and live an irresponsible lifestyle and don't know how to control their finances. Because the reality is, nobody that makes a six-figure income in the United States should be living paycheck to paycheck. Even if you live in an expensive area, you should still be able to keep things under control and manageable. And then we've had all these predictions of a recession, right? That so far, a lot of people would say hasn't actually come true. And now it's becoming the status quo thought that because it hasn't materialized in the way people have thought so far, that it's just not going to happen at all, which couldn't be further from the truth. That's not how this works, guys. Now that the fact that gas costs less than it did a year ago and the stock market is having its big rally, it's starting to make some people believe that this soft landing scenario is actually going to materialize and we're not going to have any sort of recession. And I think that's a dangerous thought right now, because as we go into the second half of 2022, it's kind of like when you're watching a football game or basketball game on TV, guys. It's halftime right now. We're going into the second half. The whole game can turn around in the second half of the game, which is what I think is probably going to happen this year. But the good thing about all of this is at least consumer sentiment is still below pre-pandemic levels. So you still have enough people out there that are skeptical of the next shoe to drop. But we don't know what that's going to be. That's the reality. And that's why I think a lot of people disagree with me when they see my videos, because you make a prediction about something, or you say, we're in a recession, and then they look at these new numbers and say, well, how can we possibly be in a recession when GDP is going up and the jobs numbers are coming in higher than expected, month after month? There's no way this can be a recession. Well, I don't really see it that way. I see it as the average person, right? You have the average person talking about how even though the experts are saying things are good, most people are still struggling right now. And we know for a fact that most people are still struggling right now, because the most recent survey from Lending Club about people's finances just revealed that 61% of Americans right now are living paycheck to paycheck, guys. That's way over half. Now, that is a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck that are basically on the brink of financial disaster, because what that means is if they just miss one paycheck, then they're going to have to choose which bills to pay this week or this month. And if they miss a second paycheck, then they probably won't be able to afford to pay half their bills. And if they lose a month's worth of income, they probably won't be able to pay any of them. So if that many people are living in this dangerous financial situation right now, how could that not mean that a recession is right around the corner, guys? This is not a good sign of where things are headed. You can't just have, 40% of the population just doing okay, and then maybe 10% of those 40% doing extremely well, and that's going to be enough to keep this whole show on the road, because it's just not. It's not enough. And when you adjust the numbers for people's income, the actual number of people living paycheck to paycheck gets even scarier. 75% of people that have less than a $50K a year income are paycheck to paycheck. And here's something nuts. People who are earning between $50,000 and $100,000 a year, even 65% of people in that income category are living paycheck to paycheck, guys. So if you think about it in a way, that's almost everyone, because most people don't make more than $100,000 a year. Of course, there are people that do, but the percentage is pretty small. So like I said, you can't have this situation where only a handful of people are doing well and everyone else is struggling, and it's all supposed to magically continue. Because even when you go beyond that, you have people who make over $100,000 a year saying 45% of them are living paycheck to paycheck. It's like, where does it end, guys? Like, how much money do you need to make to be able to make it, right? Now, obviously, if you live in an expensive area like this in Newport Beach, making $100,000 a year isn't a lot of money because everything costs a fortune here, mainly housing. You know, housing is the number one expense that people have, and when you live in a really expensive area like this, it takes up a tremendous amount of your budget, and I'd be willing to bet the cost of housing right now is one of the number one reasons why most people are living paycheck to paycheck, besides financial ineptness. You know, you're always going to have that selection of people that are just not good with money and overspend and spend on things that they shouldn't. But the reality is, a lot of people, even if they are responsible with money, are just having a tough time right now because of the increased cost of living. You have 52% of adult earners right now saying that they feel more financially stressed today than they did before the pandemic. Whoa, what a big surprise, right? And the reasons that they cite now being a stressful time when it comes to their finances is because inflation is continuing to go up, it's because interest rates are continuing to go up, and having a lack of savings. And that's an interesting point right there, because in the past, savers were losers, right? If you saved money in the bank, you weren't really making any money on interest because interest rates were practically nothing. But today, that situation is not the case, guys. Actually, having money in the bank can make you a decent amount of money in interest. Now, it might not still be enough to beat inflation, but you're still making a decent amount. Like, high interest savings accounts right now are all paying well over 4%. So that's not bad for just having money sitting in the bank, because if you got 100 grand in the bank, you're making over 4 grand a year by doing nothing. So how are people getting by? Well, we know how they're getting by. They are taking on second jobs and doing anything they can to make extra money. And on top of that, people's credit card balances are going up. And like I said a little bit ago, that we're only halfway through this year and we still haven't seen what the other half of this year is going to bring. Well, it's estimated that the second half of this year is going to bring lower consumer spending. And there's several different reasons for this, but basically it comes down to a few different things. The Fed is still raising interest rates, which makes buying any sort of big ticket item that needs to be financed far more expensive, guys. When you look at buying a car, buying a house, things like that, those things are very expensive to begin with. It's a high ticket item, and then you add these high interest rates to the mix, and people simply can't afford the payments a lot of times. So that's going to cut back on spending on those things, most likely, as the year goes on. But when we take a look at restaurants and stores, you know, things are still humming along okay, and people are using their credit cards to pay for those things, because it's not hard to whip out the credit card to pay for $100 meal or to go buy, you know, $200 worth of clothes at the store. That's still something that people can do. The average consumer can still spend that money and worry about it later. And then the next thing of why spending is likely to slow down in the second half of this year is something we already talked about. It's the personal savings rate that is continuing to drop. And in fact, all the money that people saved is likely to be exhausted by sometime before the end of this year. So all that money that was given out during the pandemic that people were able to put aside and save, it's going to be gone by the end of this year. So when people don't have the money to spend, they're not going to spend it. Only the real crazy ones that just run the credit cards to the moon and max everything out to the hilt are going to be the ones still spending. But anybody that has any sort of logical sense to their spending is not going to be doing this. And then the big shoe to drop that we have coming this fall is the resumption of the student loan payments, guys. You have 40 million Americans that have some form of a student loan right now. And if you don't think that the resumption of these payments is going to have a big impact on the economy, you need to think again. Now, even though Biden put into place this program where you can basically not make payments for a whole nother year and still get away with it and not be charged any penalties or have bad remarks go on your credit report, all those people are doing is delaying the inevitable, okay? And if you want to have any shot at your debt getting canceled down the road, then you need to be making on-time payments and not be trying to get out of it. Otherwise, you'll never get out of it. So when you have all these people that are going to be forced to cut back on spending because of all these things, what do you think that's going to do to the economy, guys? The less people spend on goods and services, the more businesses start to struggle, and the more businesses start to struggle, the more people they decide to lay off, and the more people that get laid off, the less that they will spend, the less that they can afford to pay their bills, and it's just a domino effect from there, unfortunately, but that is the way it goes. So is there any good news to all of this, Michael? Is it all just gloom and doom? Because I know some people like to say things like that too, and actually there is still a little bit of good news here, because when it comes to real estate, we're starting to see different things happen that we haven't seen in a while. Like, for example, we're starting to see a lot of these hedge funds and Wall Street investors start to actually sell more of their houses back to regular consumers like you and me. And typically what these companies will do is they will actually bundle up a bunch of their homes, say 1,000, 2,000 homes, and then turn around and sell it as a bundle to another hedge fund, right? But they're not doing that right now because these hedge funds don't want to buy these bulk deals anymore because the profitability is not there, which is why these hedge funds are deciding to get rid of these homes to begin with, because they're being selective about which properties they're getting rid of, and surprise, surprise, they're getting rid of the non-performers, and they're willing to turn around and sell those houses to people like you and me and hope to make a profit. So what does that mean for people like you and me? It means that there's going to be more housing inventory coming to the market via these institutional investors. But you might want to be a little bit cautious about these houses, guys, because if you're looking at buying something like this as an investor, you're in a losing proposition right now, because if these guys are not making money and that's the reason they're getting rid of them, what makes you think you're going to be able to turn it around and make money? The odds of that happening are pretty low. Now, if you're looking at buying one of these houses as just a place to live, like most people are, on the surface, there doesn't seem to be a problem with that, because, hey, if more listings are opening up in your neighborhood, then that's an opportunity. I'm going to have more inventory to choose from, and hopefully it'll bring some prices down in certain concentrated areas, because they're claiming, like Invitation Homes, for example, is a big net seller this year, and they've already sold over 1,000 houses up through July, and they'll probably sell another 1,000 more before the year's over. So that's 2,000 houses they're selling to people like you and me, but they even say themselves that they are selling these homes because these properties are not performing. Now, if you're looking to live in that property, why is that a problem? Well, because if you fall on hard times and for some reason you need to sell or rent that property, okay, then you're going to be the one left holding the bag, guys, because these investors that bought it probably at a lower price than you will are struggling to turn a profit on it. So what makes you think that you're going to be able to turn a profit on it as a rental, paying even higher interest rates and prices today if you need to in a pinch, or worse yet, sell it in a pinch and hope to make money there? It's probably not going to happen, guys. So that's why it's kind of a slippery slope to buy one of these properties that could potentially become for sale from a place like Invitation Homes, because they've already determined it's in not the best area that's conducive to turning a profit as a rental. So if you're in a pinch as a homeowner and needs to rent one of these houses, you have to make sure before you even buy it that you could potentially rent it for at least what your monthly expenses are, if not hopefully make a small monthly profit, okay, in order to make it feasible. Because otherwise, you could be in a situation where you're forced to sell that house if you fall on hard times, and oh wait, I can't even sell it for what I paid for, I got to sell it for even less. That's how the housing crash dominoes start falling down, if you know what I mean. Because now that they're looking to get out of these properties, you know, you have Blackstone, Invitation Homes, Homes for Rent, all these different companies looking to bail out of some of these non-performing properties. You know what they're buying instead, guys? They're buying in big rental communities. Like, you can imagine all these houses, if they were all just built to rent, they're buying places like that because that's where they determine that they can make a profit. And they're just changing markets. They're looking at different markets that have a higher potential for better profit margins. So if you see a lot of homes come up from one of these companies, then don't get too excited, because it might not be the best deal for you unless you can get it at a serious discount. So keep that in mind. If you see a house for sale and you hear the real estate agent say it's from, you know, Invitation Homes or Blackstone, you know, make sure you get that property at a pretty big discount, guys. And one other glimmer of hope for you for the housing market is foreign buyers, meaning people from other countries. Those people are starting to buy less U.S. real estate as well. In fact, the National Association of Realtors started keeping track of foreign home purchases back in 2009. Purchases from foreign buyers is down 14% year over year. They bought 84,600 homes in 2022. Now that's still a lot of American homes that could have been bought by somebody else, but you see it's starting to slow down for the same reasons that it's slowing down for us, because the prices are too high and so are the interest rates. And not all these foreigners buy with cash. A lot of them get loans and buy with financing. So you have China, Mexico, Canada, India, and Colombia being the top 5 countries throughout the rest of the world that buy American real estate. And typically they buy in places like Florida, California, Texas, North Carolina, Arizona, and Illinois. That makes up the lion's share of the foreign home purchases. So these are areas where you might start seeing an uptick in inventory as more listings come to market, but you have less buyers out there than ever before, because domestic demand is down significantly, and now we're seeing foreign demand go down significantly as well. So to me, guys, all this is good news, because little by little you're removing competition from the housing market. You're having less people than ever before able to buy. So if you are a buyer and you're somebody that can still afford to buy today, that's good news for you. But it also just means that the real estate market is coming closer and closer to a just all-out standstill. And I think that's going to be good news for buyers in the long run. That's my opinion. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next one to come out, check it out right over here. And I'll see you in the next one.